Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Firewall, the business bycast, where tech meets business. Get expert insights and real-world business leaders, IT experts, and the latest trends in bite-sized episodes. Stay ahead and explore what's beyond the firewall. And welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Firewall, where we discuss more than just technology. We bring you business leaders and exciting topics to learn and keep yourself thinking about how to grow your business. So if you've been liking these podcasts, please like and subscribe. We keep on delivering with amazing new solutions and thought leaders. Today is no exception. I've brought you some really cool, really amazing speaker with amazing technology. His name is Soumya. Soumya, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, happy to, and happy to be here. I'm Soumya. I come from a background of technology. I've been a builder for about 15 years now, built in financial services, beauty, and then the challenge I'm tackling right now is in the legal space. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Donna AI, and we help small law firms with their operational work, which sucks up 40% of their time, believe it or not. And that's really the problem we're looking to solve now.
That's really amazing. And legal firms are an interesting niche market. And for those that have never heard of Donna Answers and the firm that you're founding here, well, why don't you give us a little bit more background on the pillars of what Donna Answers has to deliver today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, about 40% of the work spent in a law firm is actually non legal work. It's operational or administrative work that really sucks away from a lawyer focusing on what they went to school for, what they went to law school for. They're not trained for this. This is more like things that you'd go to business school for in order to optimize and make systems. And at the same time, this is preventing law firms from growing their practice. And if you think about pillars, we really categorize it in three different pillars. One is growth. How do you enable these law firms to grow more? And so we have some products and a roadmap built around that. The second is case operations. When a case is actually going on, like what are the menial, tedious tasks that they have to do nonstop, be a babysitter and follow up with the clients for documents or review tons and tons of documents, which they're not trained for, like financial statements, bank statements. They didn't go to accounting school for that information. And then the third pillar is billing. So one of the things we hear quite often is a lawyer takes a retainer, but a client is way past that retainer. Not a lot of the lawyer has forgotten to bill many hours and they don't know how to recoup that. And also, when they even send the bill to the client, they're not getting responses for months at a time. So they're unable to forecast their cash flow because of all of this, and which actually prevents money in their pocket.
Very interesting. Like I've been servicing the legal industry now since inception. Actually, my first handful of clients actually was specializing in, doing the IT and the managed services for law firms 20 plus years ago. And yeah, there was really, you had an admin, you may have had a bookkeeper, PC law. Obviously, that was sort of the standard in Canada for decades. And now we have obviously new platforms like Clio, Cosmolex. There are a plethora of, call it time billing management solutions, but it still requires a lot of human intervention and interaction and being able to get your admin staff. And what I'm hearing a lot from firms today is the fact that they're having a hard time finding the right amount of talent, and then the work ethic that, they're demanding is not exactly meeting the expectations to what, the workforce is sort of. There's a disconnect between the workforce in the legal assistance resources and what the lawyers are sort of expecting. There's sort of a gap today. So having sort of the tools to help bridge that gap, I think is really critical today, especially with some of the younger workforce coming into effect. And even with the workload in general, I think that a lot of law firms now are trying to expand the amount of work that they're doing. And at the same time, being able to keep up with all of that. It's high pace. It's good to stay profitable. You got to be doing more cases. You got to take on more clients. You got to do more billable hours. And it's not just about raising rates, because the reality is there is a tipping point where you've got a ceiling where people are able to be able to afford that. So really interesting position on where you're at with this. So, talk to me about a real case here, a real world scenario. So, like, what would be one of the examples when it comes to some of the products that you've already built out that would we can kind of go through?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about maybe a billing aspect that we've done. So we have an AI time tracker. It's a desktop application that you download onto your platform, and it captures all the activity that you do alongside with all any calls or meetings that you're in, with integrations with email providers and calendars and practice management softwares. So this is fully automatic, no manual entry. That's what we're trying to sell. Prior state used to look like, and what a lot of our customers faced prior to having this product is they're going into the Clio or the PC laws who have a timer, and you're pressing start that I'm working on this case, and then you're pressing stop. And because of that, a lot of times, a lot of opportunities get missed. If you get an email, for example, and you're responding back to that email, that might be a 12-minute response, but you may not remember that, hey, let me start the timer, let me stop the timer, and let me write a billing narrative afterwards about what I did, because that needs to be auditable by the law society as well if you ever get questioned about it. So there's a lot of money left on the table. On average, there's data on this, about $50,000 of attorney fees attorney billable hours get laid on the table per year, and that's a lot. That's a whole salary in itself. So with us tackling that with zero intervention, no manual entry, we're actually gaining a lot of revenue for the company. Similarly, talking about case operations, when a first case begins for most of these personal practice areas, they have to gather a lot of documents or evidences that the client told them about during consultation. So I'll give you an example of family law. If I'm going through a divorce, I might have, between me and my wife, I might have three checking accounts, two savings accounts, two brokerage accounts, two cars, one primary home, one investment property. I have a golf set that's expensive. I have to bring documentation about all of them. Now, this goes into the hundreds, because in all of these documents, not only am I providing it for 1 month, I'm providing it for potentially all 12 months. Or if it's a short marriage, I'm also providing it at the time of marriage, which was 2 or 3 years ago. These are hundreds of documents that admin staff or a lawyer is actually reaching out to the customer and navigating their way through. They're talking to their clients. They're saying, "Hey, you gave me the last 3 years of tax returns, but I actually needed five." Yeah, somebody's locked out of their bank portal and doesn't know how to get their online statement. You have to walk them through. Okay, here's how you reset your password. Go to this tab and download this, and then send it over. This is, for a case like a divorce case, the most expensive and time consuming part of before a pre-trial. And this is all a time that's like going back and forth and emails and SMSs and voices. And there's so many different methods that you really lose track. And so that's kind of another thing that we tackle all together. The law firm just provides us a list originally, and then we tackle it all and bundle it together. And we work with their client in order to bring the complete picture to the law firm. So those are some examples of how we're kind of helping law firms at present day.
So family law is obviously a big one where you help consolidate it. Now, is this all the documentation collection management? Is that something that's within your ecosystem, or is this tie into other third party documentation management? So, like if I've got an existing repository, how does that work? Because I find that, a lot of law firms today, the biggest question will be is, well, how do I transition all this, right? Like I've got decades or several years of all this case law that I've done. And now I'm looking at it going, okay, well, how do I transition? So is
Yeah.
your product plugging into existing SharePoint file servers, stuff like that? Or does your product have its own ecosystem and its own database with all of this documentation management?
So it's a little bit of both. So we want to make this easier for law firms. So at the end of the day, if they're using a SharePoint or a Google Drive, we push it directly in there. And not only do we push it, we relabel it, we organize it in the proper folders, which all is time consuming and tedious work. Where they go to our portal is if they ever want to get a current status of when was the last time a follow-up was done from us to the client, or what is the status of this particular case, how many have been collected and not. And if you just want an aggregate value, that's when you go into our portal or when you're creating a new case. But besides that, we do push it to whatever platform that they want. And we're actively live with large portion of the big ones like Dropbox, OneDrive, SharePoint, Google Drive, etc. So making it very, very easy for them.
I actually think this is more incredible than I had anticipated because one of the challenges I've dealt with several other law firms is that they've got a proprietary case management software platform, be it in, family or some of these other verticals, and they feel stuck, right? Because it's got all the history, it's got all the links, it's got all the attachments, and all of a sudden it's like, well, you want me to put it at where? And so they're looking for a turnkey end-to-end product, which means that you've got to look at data residency,
Yep.
backup and compliance. You've got to now figure out, can I move all the data out of it? And the migration cost is extensive.
Huge.
So if you can actually now move it into a SharePoint or a Google or a Dropbox, which most of those platforms are compliant, data residency is not an issue, and your security and all that is all there, meets all the compliance checklists, be it an ISO, a SOC, all those different things. Now your tool plugs into it and has that, interface to be able to pull the data, access the data, and the data residency is still intact in the Microsoft ecosystem.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And so one of the things that gives us a good advantage over this is I come from a background of financial services and my last company was in beauty. These are both regulated spaces where you have to be very delicate with customer information, law information, anything PII like personal identifier information and many others and how data is transmitted, how it is at rest. So as we build Donna, we had security top of mind and we follow best SOC 2 practices and we go over and above any regulations that are really out there to make sure the data is secure. So definitely top of mind.
So, I don't like to put certain industries in a pigeonhole here, but when you look at law firms, they tend to be more conservative. Your lawyers, they tend to be more conservative. You don't see them taking Hail Marys here. So when you look at the typical practice, what do you see today as partly to do with resistance of adoption, and how do you make them feel comfortable beyond the fact that you can say with 1,000 stamps on the wall, hey, we're secure, we're reliable, our uptime, we're on ecosystems like Amazon or however you back end your infrastructure. So let's say you're bulletproof in that regard. How do you get a lawyer today to feel comfortable to say, my files are sitting in my office, they're on a server, I can physically see that in my ecosystem in my back office, which a lot of law firms still do have their data or part of their data residing in office or within their framework. How are you getting them to kind of feel confident that this is the way to go? And from there, I would almost do it as a two-part question. How are you showing them measurable outcomes and benefits out of this whole thing?
Yeah. Let me tackle the first. Maybe let me tackle the second one first. The measurable outcomes is ROI. It's can we result this to real dollars? That's what we believe in internally as well. So every one of our products is can we get you more billable hours as a time tracker? Can we save a bunch of work for you in the case operations aspect so you can actually take on more clients and focus on more work? From the growth category, are we directly bringing in more clients? So our North Star KPI is always for the client, it's ROI, direct revenue. In terms of how do we make law firms comfortable? So there's a little bit of nuance here in the sense where there's a lot of pressure coming from their end clients. So in the 2010s, I like to say that during the origin of like the big SaaS era, lawyers adapted a little bit, but less than other industries, in my opinion. So everyone got on practice management platforms like Clio and things like that. But besides that, they were kind of reluctant because it didn't meet their incentive of the billable hour. So how efficient you should be is kind of contradictory to the billable hour aspect. So only the stuff that they really, really didn't want to do and that was purviewed into from the customer could see, only that stuff really got taken off. Now I think we're in a different era where there's a lot of client pressure. Hey, stop charging me for stuff that AI can do. Stop charging me for sending me an email. Stop charging me for sending me a follow up text. Like, so I think all lawyers kind of know that. So they are in the market for, hey, we know this, our industry is about to change. So let's try to get ahead of it. And obviously, some people are further ahead than others, but there's a little bit of curiosity along the way. Now, what we have found best is treating them like a partner. And as a partner, education goes a long way. So, in your direct, I guess, question about how do you make them comfortable with all of your data and all of that, it's education at the end of the day. We kind of we show them that, hey, look at the Googles and the Microsofts and the Clios of the world. These are the standards they live by. We live by the same standards. And more often than not, I think they're receptive as long as there's trust built, right? The people that they're the folks that are not receptive, you just haven't built enough trust yet. So that's also why we really try, we don't try to sell them right away. We really try to take it as like a partnership. Let me educate you over time. If you want to look at other products, great. We'll even nudge you the right way and the wrong way for different things. And then from there, like if you think that we're actually solving a problem, then let's have another conversation.
That's amazing. Yeah, I agree with you on a lot of those. I was just part of your answer that sparked like I think about 15 more questions, but I will say that that resonates quite well with me. The number one thing I would almost bring up is AI and the fact that people are calling you out today. So it's ironic, but every other person that I talk to in the business world is like, well, I use Claude to, before I even bother asking my lawyer, I'm using Claude or ChatGPT or whatever not, and I'm seeing what the answers are. And if it makes sense to me, that's what I'm sending off to, the conversation before I'll engage my lawyer. Or they come more equipped than ever before because now you can upload, all of your, let's call it documentation yourself and try to ask it to come back to you with some response. And so, yeah, I think lawyers today need to change the game in some capacity. I know that in our world, we've had to change the game significantly because we no longer can charge 80% of our day to day, I call it basic services or rudimentary services, where we used to charge that by the hour. Today, it's all on a fixed fee of some sort, and it's just covered as some sort of like a support contract. I think the basic business 101, call it legal services, will have to become some sort of a subscription. And if it isn't yet, I think that that's the next sort of aha moment for law firms out there. But on the flip side, I think I've spoken to other lawyers and they're concerned about hallucinations. They're also concerned about the reliability of the data that they're getting. One of my big sort of secondary questions, and I'm sure you get this a lot, is, hey, we're going to upload all my data to your system, where your system is going to have access to all of my case law. And how are you safeguarding my data, not only from the public side, but let's just say that again, that is fully ironclad, and like we're not concerned about security, but we're concerned about reliability. So I need to find another case relating to this circumstance. How is it that your AI system is not going to hallucinate like we've heard of other horror stories, and basically safeguard the law firm? Because now apparently lawyers are now fully liable and responsible to vet all the research and documentation that AI is generating. Otherwise, the case could be thrown out.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, that's the same as what they did for their junior lawyers. If you got an articling student or your paralegal to draft something up, it's always been the lawyer's responsibility to be the last line of defense and review that work in order for it to be correct. AI is no different. And there's a different aspect, right? So, legal AI, I think this is a lack of understanding for a lot of the lawyers in the market out there. When they think about legal AI, they think about directly research and document drafting. That's usually where it goes to. Like, I can save time on research and document drafting. And while that was true, and those were the big frontiers maybe a year and a half to 2 years ago, that's not true anymore. There's so many different categories. So if you don't feel comfortable with the citations it gives, don't use AI for research. Use AI for something else. So what we do is we use AI for operational tasks. Like I said, collecting documents, managing time. None of this information is going to court. None of this information is actually helping telling you that, hey, you should strategize your case like this. But those tools are also great. I'm not against those tools by any means. But like what I would say is when you had a junior lawyer who joined month one, did you review all of their work? Well, review all of AI's work until you build trust, similar to how you would build trust for that lawyer.
Yeah. Another great response there. Yeah, I think that there was misconception around the fact that, the data would be 100%. And it's interesting because I've heard different perspectives of it with in respect to one, AI tries to make you happy because it's
Mm.
actually built to appease you and to make you happy and to give you the response and the narrative you want to hear, which is why there's been these types of hallucinations. On the flip side, the answers have been perceived as the gospel. So when we look at Google, that's been around for now 20, is it 20 some odd years? I forgot
99, I
exactly.
think. Yeah, 27
Yeah,
years. I think 1999.
yeah, it's been a while, So like when Google came out, nobody relied on it. Like people forget that, when the search engines of the world came out, the reliability of that was, subpar. And even then, after over a decade, when people started relying on it, then the problem was identifying what was the fake information to the real information. And you looked at then tools like Google reviews and sort of fact checking applications to help make sure that when you land on a website there was a site trust. So then they came out with a little insignia to show that the data on this website is secure and it's not a malicious website, and so on and so forth. So we're getting into a very interesting new world around cybersecurity, on AI, the reliability of AI, and where it's all going. It's relatively new. People just forget that this is less than 24 months really impacting the industry, right? Most of these products are less than 12 months old.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
mm,
So I think for that particular purpose, if someone is skeptical about AI, what I always recommend to them is, like I mentioned, AI adoption could go in many different ways, and there's many different categories. Find something that is low stakes or what you perceive as low stakes. Start
right,
there, build comfort there, and then gradually make up your stakes. Similar to if you were to go jump off a bridge, maybe that's a bad example, but do like a ski slope jump. You're going to start with kind of a 2 feet a high slump before you go into 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, right? Make your
right.
way there.
So, that's a really good point. And I know you guys have a series of products today, and there are other platforms out there that do different services. How do you help firms identify that, call it the easy soft landing? Like obviously there's time billing, there's, data collections. I think one of your other solutions that I've seen is sort of like a virtual receptionist or, an an AI attendant.
Yes.
Taking on all of this can be daunting and overwhelming. And, there's going to be obviously people that are in the firm that are resistant to even using some of these tools. How do you go through that decision making process with the client to say, here's our soft entry point?
Yeah. So that's a really good point. And what I think about that is what can be internal that's not external facing. And when you think about external facing, there's two types of external parties that are out there. There's one which is your client and one which is like your court, right? So anything that's touching the court or your client, maybe you want to do that later in the flow. Anything that's internal, you do that first. That's actually one of the reasons why we came out with the time tracker product because that's fully internal. Nobody's going to see it. If it has a hiccup, nobody besides the lawyer and the law firm is really going to know. So very low stakes, low risk. And so our uh, um, concept that we tell a lot of pilot customers who are actually hesitant on some of these other solutions is try us out over here, see if this works. And again, going back to ROI, see if this is making you more money. How much did you bill last month? Look at our first month of billing. I'm not even saying look at us 3 months from now. Look at our very first month of billing. See, are you billing more? Yes, you are. Does this work correctly? How many times have you had to intervene? Great. If not, then like let's look at some of these other solutions out there. And same thing also with anything that's going to a court, there has to be a reviewer step. So any product that you're building, as long as there's like a human in the loop. So we have human in the loops in various places where anything is actually dangerous. Keep you choosing a product that has a human in the loop when it is higher stakes. That also goes a long way.
Right. Okay. That's good. You know what? I see that and I makes complete sense for me as well. Cause, no different than when we started, I'll call it outsourcing, you know,
Exactly.
we were very selective on what we did with outsourcing our marketing or outsourcing our call centers or do anything along those lines. You want to be selective on what's customer facing, what's back end office. So like an administrative clerk, nobody really sees an admin clerk. So some companies outsource that to offshore resources. The customer will never know that,
Right.
files are being managed offshore versus somebody sitting in the office, nor do they care 8 out of 10 times. So having that decision making process is really really smart. I like that. Yeah, it's really interesting, and I always love the, what's the word, the thought process around this and the vision. I'm trying to figure out now, where does this all land, and I would love to kind of see sort of like, what do you see today where your company Donna, or just AI in general, will reshape the legal industry? What's your sort of vision 12 months out? I wouldn't even go 24 months. I would say it's going to be next to impossible to say 24 months. So we may have robots at that point in time. Who knows?
I agree. I don't think a lot of people can visualize past 12 months, at least accurately.
Yeah.
At the moment. So one of the things that I think the industry is going to go towards is more internal efficiencies, and because of those internal efficiencies, it doesn't mean that the work effort put in behind the scenes is not valuable. Because of that, we're going to go away from the hourly rate more and more within the next 12 months. It's already happening with a lot of customers we're speaking with. They used to have 100% of their cases bill on hourly. A lot of them are going into a hybrid model. And an example of, there's many ways you can do a hybrid, but an example of a hybrid model is, hey, for a certain motion or for a certain basic type of case, we're going to charge you a flat fee, but there's going to be additional hourly cost if there's in-person hearings, or if it goes to trial, or if it goes to mediation or discovery. Those aspects will be based on hourly, but rest of the things will be packaged as a fixed cost. So overall, a hybrid model, and I don't think we're very far from that. Within 12 months, I think the majority of law firms is going to take a step towards that direction, so they can still value capture all the time savings that AI is bringing them.
Yeah, and I think that sort of was like we sort of touched on that before. IT today, most of your basic tech support today for 9 out of 10 firms out there, it's on a flat retainer per month, and you've got virtually unlimited help desk. And for those firms out there, and I actually know some competitors that are still doing time material, I'm like, that's hasn't been done in over a decade at this point in time. It's an interesting model. And at the end of the day, you have to kind of juggle that. Okay, you know what? Setting up a corporation, yes, I can do it myself. Chances are there's going to be some AI robo advisor to set up a corporation. Maybe a simple business. Yeah, sure, I can do that with AI. But on the flip side, the shareholders agreement, you're still going to want a lawyer to kind of review that and maybe provide some guidance and advice that AI is not going to be ideal to use as a tool today, especially if it's a complex, shareholders agreement. And then on the flip side, with family law, again, you've got variables that maybe it's a simple case or something very, rudimentary that you can say, okay, you know what, this is pretty straightforward, cut and dry, in and out. Thank you very much. And then there's the complex cases, which are, a lot more hands on. And at the end of the day, it will impact both beneficial. I think from a billing perspective, I think profitability can go up if it's being embraced. On the flip side, it just means that you're not doing the business that you've been doing for the last 50 years. And that
Very
that
true.
is going to be.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the hardest part for all the partners out there and the firms out there that are just looking at, T&M, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, I'm gotta break that mold. And it's a real shift. It took me a long time. I could tell you, I think it took me like 3 to 5 years to build that model in the IT industry because there was no model to build on. It
Yeah.
literally had to start from scratch. And we switched in 2008 away from, like, not everything, but we stopped billing certain things on an hourly to more of a flat fee every month. And
Right.
was very hard. We had to learn lessons learned, but I think overall, long term, it was the right way. And today, 9 out of 10 MSPs and tech support companies charge a flat retainer.
Yeah. No, and you're
So
right about that, right? And it took you 3 to 5 years because there wasn't as much industry pressure. I think right now, if in the age of AI, whether you look at the ARR growth of Claude or just AI adoption of like OpenAI or something, OpenAI has 1 billion active users. Like any no tool in the history of the world got to that usage that fast. So everything is being accelerated. So if you were to redo it today, your 3 to 5 years would look significantly smaller because there's gonna be macro pressures that may not have existed to the full extent back then. I'll give you a story. I was at an event last week, and I hear this quite often, but this is very specific. But I was at an event last week speaking with a lawyer. He was a managing partner at a firm, and we were talking about AI. And he had mentioned he's like, I'm about 4 to 5 years away from retirement, or I thought I was. But with AI coming up, I don't plan to switch my practice of the way I've done stuff for the last 40 years. So because of that, I can only hold on as long as AI doesn't penetrate it. So what I thought I would retire in 4 to 5 years, it might end up being 2 to 3. And I'm okay with that. And so I think everyone kind of knows that it's coming and it's here. And yes, it is a big, big business model change, completely different business model change. But that's what macro climates do over time. That's what macro climate did at COVID. That's what macro climate did maybe in like the 2008 recession when the internet bubble came out, etc. So whoever is really stuck around in the long term has been able to adapt to these changes. And whoever will stick around going forward, whether it's AI or the next wave of technology or innovation, they're still going to have to adapt.
yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think that we're in it for it. We have the same challenges too. Like if you think about it, like if you don't think AI is impacting IT, at the end of the day, I was at a tech show a week or two ago, and it was a new cybersecurity upgrade for a firewall brand. And that brand actually has now an AI based interface. So it's all voice recognition. And you can basically, you'll get almost like a Star Trek kind of thing where it says your network is being attacked. And then you're like, okay, well, diagnose where it's sourcing from. And it tells you. And then you're like, okay, well, block this country or block the IP. And it's like, okay, blocking the IP. Okay, successfully blocked the IP, now monitoring. And it'll tell you, the hacker is now trying to come in through another source, and you basically are interfacing with this AI agent to mitigate a hacker into your network with the new software upgrades. So this is the reality. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. I unless you're, laying bricks and still doing some plumbing, which is why some people are leaving into trades, because there's a little bit more runway before that industry is going to be more impacted. But for the meanwhile, professional services, it's here and it's now. So it's not something that we can hide away from. And we are all going to need to be responsive. And I think businesses in general are looking at getting the right advice on how to prepare themselves, how to make that transition, how to, put a plan together, not just for the technology, but how to rebuild their company around those technologies. And I think that that is a thing that a lot of people out there are struggling with. And I would say typically, don't try to create a wheel. There are several wheels out there already that can be sort of copied, rinsed, and reused. And obviously, you'll have to make it your own. But I think that that is key and critical. Do you guys support companies in that long term planning, or is this something that you need to find a partner? Or do you guys work with the in house IT department to kind of strategize around that?
Yeah, so couple of things. I think we're still a little early where we don't have an official program behind this. But when we do hear companies who are looking to learn about the AI space, we're happy to help them out. So, for example, next week, we're going into a law firm's office for a lunch and learn, trying to give them an overview of the AI space. There's no sales involved. We just want to be partners. And we're trying to give them here how other people are using AI. Here's what you should look out for here and here like really bad stories, ugly stories that you should be able to like you should prevent no matter what. We try to definitely do that. The other thing we try to do is We're actually in very good relationships with multiple legal ops departments. So in some of the bigger firms above like 10, 15 lawyers, they have a legal ops department. They're actually in charge of picking the tooling and figuring out the security and running kind of the operations of what you would imagine at a firm. Now, we're partnered with a lot of them in order to keep feeding them good data about the industry as a whole, where to look out for. So we are doing that informally, but we haven't created a formal structure about it yet.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for us, I would say that that has been a new sort of driving conversation around advisory and consulting. In the past several months, I would say we've had a dozen or so different firms that have reached out to us to help them build those plans, strategize both clients and non clients. Like, I think a lot of people are just looking for opinions and suggestions, and they want to make sure that they're making a capital investment that's going to survive. And when you look at even ChatGPT versus Claude, which is, in today's news quite heavily, ChatGPT was sort of on top of the hill, and then Claude comes out with some updates, and within a matter of a week, surpasses, leapfrogs, ChatGPT, and all of a sudden, for the last 30 days, Claude is all over the news, and ChatGPT is nowhere to be heard. So, and I can tell you with my colleagues, it's like everyone's like, "Well, I'm canceling my ChatGPT and I'm moving all my stuff to Claude," and I'm like, "What happens when ChatGPT releases their latest update?" And it's going to be like, well, now we're better. And so, like, it's going to be this leapfrog, eventually somebody's going to be let's call it a clear winner. But this is reminding me of the era of like PC, Apple, Linux, Unix, and then with the browser, there was Netscape and, there was, I think, like 7 or 10. There was Safari, Netscape, talking the dot-com era kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then now we're dealing with AI, and there's a handful of platforms out there, and eventually one's going to be the big winner. But the question will be, is do they get acquired by the Google and the Microsofts of the world, or do they become the next Google, product out there, and now Google is no longer the lion of the internet. So it's really interesting to see where that's at. And even Gemini, I'm hearing a lot of buzz as well now in the developer world,
Yeah.
that they're actually picking up significant momentum, that they're almost like the hidden gem right now, because they're not in the forefront of the news like the Geminis and, sorry, the Claude and the ChatGPT. So it's interesting to see, because Gemini is still not something to be discarded as much as people think. And obviously, with Copilot being the Microsoft ecosystem, still technically built on ChatGPT with their ownership. And I don't think that that's really being unplugged on that level, but I could be wrong. I'm slightly speculating on that. So, as a final sort of question, any exciting sort of features or functionality announcements you want to kind of highlight? And I got two last questions. So number one is, any features or anything that really cool that's coming out in your space, or any product announcements that you're going to be launching, you willing to share today?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of our roadmap is under the wraps, but one of them that I can share is one of the things, like, we want to directly impact ROI. And like I mentioned earlier in the call, one of the things we keep hearing is the bills are not generated on time. And when the bill is actually sent to them, people don't pay for an extended period of time. So it's very hard to actually forecast cash flow and then based on that make growth investments or anything like that. So with our time capture, time tracking product, we're actually taking it a step forward where we're actually going to be generating bills, billing clients, and then following up with them in order for payments, figuring out payment plans in order to forecast revenue much earlier and also get that revenue into a lawyer's pocket much earlier as well. So we're really looking forward to that.
Well, you're talking money, that's going to make any business owner, forget if it's a lawyer or another business owner, any money collecting, billing, automation suite, I think should be front and center for every business owner, especially if you're an independent owner. I think that that is the number one problem for any business owner. Doesn't matter if you're doing 100 grand a year or if you're doing $10 million a year. You're always looking at getting your bills out on time and making sure that you're getting collected. So that is an incredible product. I look forward to seeing that. One last question I have for you, and this will sort of wrap it up, is what Do you predict as a legal service or a legal task that will never be replaced by AI? That's a loaded question, but I am going to ask that.
So I think lawyers are not going to get replaced. It's never our intention to replace lawyers, and I don't think they're going to get replaced because it's a unique industry where they self-regulate. And that only lawyers with a bar license and people, even if you're on the bar association, you're a lawyer, can actually practice in the court of law. So anything that has to do with court of law, like going to a hearing, filing something with a law, courthouse, or anything like that, that is never getting replaced. The strategy leading up to it, the heavy lifting leading up to it is definitely going to get augmented by AI. But this is a very unique industry where I don't think they're going to let themselves die, and they shouldn't. They do add value to the economy and to the whole world, and I really want to see them succeed as well.
I agree with you on that. And if you look at the history of law and how new case has been, new laws have been created, new cases, circumstance, and so on and so forth, doesn't matter what element of it between, corporate, family, whatever it is, all the different aspects of law. I think it's a critical fabric of our society today, and that human element is always been what drove it forward. So the book is the book, the rule is the rule, but the human side of the case itself has always kind of made things meander and update itself, like you said, like there's updates and the human element of it. I think that is the biggest fabric of what law is, and it's almost like a living breathing document with boundaries. And I
Yep.
think regardless of how much further we go down, if it's another 50 years or 100 years, you can't let a machine dictate that on you, because there's no element of human nature, human intuition, compassion. I couldn't imagine,
Yeah, morality.
having a yeah, like none of that stuff. Like you can put code in there, but the reality is that, that just doesn't make any logical sense. And I think that is being debated today when
Yes.
I hear about, the let's call it legislation and AI police and all these other things that are being discussed right now. I think they're putting, some level of boundaries on it, but I think they need to, because if we don't put some guardrails on it now, who knows what that's going to look like if they don't. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, Somiya, really pleasure having you on our podcast. It was really enlightening, and my head's spinning right now thinking about all the things that we talked about. It was just mind jogging, between the AI, the legal, what's coming, what's going. So I want to thank you for being on our podcast. It was really great having you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun for me as well, and I hope your listeners like it.
Well, I hope so too. And everybody out there, thank you for listening. Hopefully, you enjoyed this episode. If you please like and subscribe. Tell all your friends about it. We're always expanding our listeners and followers, and we're always looking for amazing guests for our show. So please reach out if you have anybody that wants to be on our show and has something interesting to talk about. Again, thank you for listening to Beyond the Firewall. I'm Erez Zavlunov, and have yourself a great day.